I'm Corbett Wall with DVAuction, here with your feeder flash for Thursday, May the 23rd, brought to you in part by Kansas Regenerative Medical Center. Transform your health with stem cell therapy. Kansas RMC's focus is on arthritis and orthopedic issues for your joints, back, and neck. These guys are pioneers. Check them out at kansasrmc.com. 800-pound stockers. You don't see that. I've never actually seen that in a big drive of cattle. And maybe some of you have. It's a new thing. Only in the last few years have we really seen 7-weight stalker type cattle. But now they're up to 800 pounds. And we can visit about that a little bit. Sometimes I take too much liberty with some people that would like to get in on this and they don't really understand the terms. But there's all types of cattle, and we talk about a lot of them. We got breeding cattle and replacement cattle, both breeding replacement cattle and feedlot replacement cattle. We've got dairy cattle that I don't like to talk about. We've got rodeo cattle. We've got all kinds of cattle. We've got show cattle. We've got this. We've got that. But on a commercial basis, and especially when it comes to this program, we're usually talking about stalker cattle, feeder cattle, and slaughter cattle. And stalker cattle are just that. They're for stocking pastures, stocking forage. They're to turn out, they're to graze. So you've got stock cows, you've got stalker calves, you've got yearling stalkers. But most of the time they're a lighter weight. But now we're getting into heavier weight stalkers because we take our feeders to heavier weights. But feeder cattle are just that also. Cattle that are going on to feed to finish. Now sometimes we see lightweight calves or go into some type of a growing yard, but that's a growing yard. They're not going to be put on a finishing ration, so they're basically just trying to take them to a heavier weight. And at times you can see cattle come out of a grow yard and go to stocking pastures. But the hell of it is, if you leave them in there too long, they're not going to like what you put them out to stock on. And that's the one rule you never should break when you're dealing with feeder cattle of all kinds, is you never want to buy any cattle that you can't give a better home to than what they've already had. And a lot of people make that mistake buying fat calves or buying cattle that are too fleshy and then trying to turn them out. They're going to go backwards on you for a while, guys. You've got to buy cattle that you intend to give a better home to than what they've already had. But you see light calves go into a backgrounding lot. Now they're not concerned with finishing at all, and not really that concerned with growing them. They're just concerned on getting their health straightened out and then getting them ready to go. But we talked about your stalkers. Now your feeders, we see feeder calves. Feeder calves are basically calves that have been left on the cow. The genetics are so good, or they've been supplementally fed until they're at a weight and at a flesh condition that people don't want to turn them out anymore. So they're going to have to go right to feed. You see that in the northern plains. People take really good care of their cattle up there, and the cattle are genetically superior to what you average see further south in the United States. And so by the time, if they're weaning calves weighing in the 7s or maybe even 800 pounds, where are you going to turn them out that they're going to like it? They're not. They've been heavily supplementally fed. They've been on mother's milk. The only place you can really impress them is putting them into a feedlot and put them on a ration there, a concentrated ration that they'd like. But you do see feeder calves, and then you see yearling feeders, which is typically what you would think would go on feed there. But I'm talking to you here on this session is because on Wednesday I saw a string or a big load of the heaviest stalker cattle that I've ever known confirmed that they were going to be stalkers. Now you guys might have seen a few here, a few there like this, but 800-pound or more stockers is unbelievable. And they also brought the highest price that I've ever seen for that weight. Now I'm going to make you guys wait until the end of this report for our Macrocin No BS top quote for the day to find out more about those cattle. But you know, we've set a new bar now, and these cattle are you know, we're taking cattle to heavier weights. You know, I mentioned just in the last few years we've seen 7-weight stockers. And we're seeing more and more of that all the time. It's really jacking around with our CME cash feeder cattle index, because it takes cattle weighing from 7 to 899 pounds. Well, if you get some cattle that have a thinner type condition, like a grazing condition weighing in the 7s, people are buying those cattle to go to grass. And they're going to have a cheaper weight gain out there, and because of the condition of those cattle, well, it's really you know, causing our index levels to be higher than it would if we were just considering just feeder cattle. But how do you do that? How do you pluck those cattle out? And you really can't. And in fact, you know, those index cattle just going up to 899 pounds, that's not really heavy enough. You know, our feeder cattle, our feeding type cattle are mostly in the 9s. And yet we're dealing with index cattle weighing from 7 to 899 pounds, and that's something that CME needs to address. But we're not scared to take cattle to heavier weights turned out on grass. It hasn't been that long ago that whenever you had cattle coming off grass to sell as feeders, if they were weighing much into the 9s, they were harder to sell, because your feedlot people, your cattle feeders, didn't really want to buy cattle that were weighing much over a 9. They felt like they didn't feed as well. The cattle didn't have quite as much stretch to them, and cattle were harder to feed, and they would quit you. But now we're starting to see people are really wanting heavier weight feeder cattle. They don't mind them weighing in the 9s all the way to 1,000 or 1,000 pounds. They don't mind buying cattle weighing well over 1,000 pounds before they put them on feed, because you know, we're just learning how to feed those type of cattle. They're buying cattle that's got some stretch to them, and they're going to take them to heavier weights. And we're not seeing any discounts or penalties from our packers for these huge carcasses. You know, our average dressed steer carcass weight is 925 pounds right now. It hasn't been that long ago that they were penalizing any carcass weighing over 9. In fact, we got some packers that are actually giving a premium for heavy carcasses. And that's all to help them out of this tight supply problem that they've got right now. And we're more than willing, most of the time, to help them out with that. You know, show us a carrot or show us a market, and we'll flood it just as quick as we can with cattle feeders, because that's just the way it is, and farmers do the same thing too. But it's just an interesting thing to look at. It's the way the industry has changed over the last 15, 20 years, but it's worth mentioning. Let's look at your board. June live cattle futures up $1.20 at 184.17. August up 1 1/4 cent, or $1.25 at 181.67. Your back months on live cattle up $1 to $1.50. May feeder cattle up 142 at 250.37, and still stretching out ahead of our index levels just a little bit. And August feeder cattle up 307 at 262.90 based on an 800-pound steer. You know, and I told you not long ago, I think that these steers coming off grass this mid to late this summer, you know, they're going to be in that 280 range somewhere. It's what I feel like. But they're going to have to stretch some more to get out there, guys. But your back months on feeder cattle up 177 to 262. Excuse me. July corn down 1/4 cent a bushel at 461. Beans down 1 1/2 cent bushel at 12.44 3/4. Kansas City hard red winter wheat up 1 1/4 cent at $7.75 a bushel. Let's talk about your fat cattle trade. Didn't see much, but it's showing that it's going to be higher. There's no doubt about that. It's going to be higher. There's a good chance that we may reach an all-time record high weighted average for live steers this week. Yet we've already seen a little bit of trade in the northern plains higher than we've seen it last week at 192. We've already seen trade in the southern plains higher than where we've seen it last week at 187. So, and then everybody else is passing those bids right now. So it's going to be higher here. I think the board could even crash here on Thursday, and we're still going to see a higher fat cattle trade. These packers have really tipped their hand as about how tight they are, how short bought they are. And now that we've seen box beef cutout values rally quite a bit, now we're starting to see our slaughter picking up a little bit. I'm not sure it's going to be quite as tight here going forward, because we're getting to the time of the year where they've really got to make hay, because we're going to get all this big beef demand here early this summer and late the rest of the spring here. But we didn't see any trade in the northern plains on Wednesday, nothing out of Iowa or Nebraska. Kansas sold 1,150, and these are mostly all fed cattle exchange trades. So the fed cattle exchange through Central Stockyards, they have their online platform to buy cattle. People can consign their cattle on there. Packers are getting on there and bidding on the cattle, especially as tight as they are. Pretty much all your packers are getting on there and trying to buy cattle. They sold cattle, bid the grid on Wednesday on Fed Cattle Exchange in the Southern Plains at 188 and a quarter. Bid the grid in the Southern Plains on beef on dairy cattle. And those cattle light up the grid. You know how they sell down there, and we're seeing more and more of that. But they sold negotiated cash live cattle in the Southern Plains at 187 on the Fed Cattle Exchange. The direct sellers could get 187 if they wanted it later in the day after they establish that, but most of them have decided to pass that. They may end up having to take that here today on Thursday or maybe even Friday, but if they do, this market's still going to be higher for the week, guys. But Kansas sold 1,150 head at 187. Texas sold 200 head that way at 187. Fat cattle auction in the Northern Plains, Sioux Falls Regional Livestock in Worthing, South Dakota. DVAuction broadcaster there. They had a good fat cattle auction. Had a light comparison last week, but the market was higher. And they sold conventional and program type fat cattle from 186 to 195 and a half in Worthing, South Dakota. I want to mention that a friend of mine that lives in Colorado that I talk to periodically brought to my attention that Yuma County, Colorado had severe hail earlier this week. And I mean, it was devastating to the crops, devastating to the grass pastures, and devastating to livestock. There were many cattle that were killed. A lot of the cattle were beat up pretty bad, and really they said they were hard to look at. And just a really devastating storm of hail that come through Yuma County, Colorado. Something you might want to consider and think about that's happened this last week. Now, I'm not sure, I really doubt that it's going to make much of a change in the whole scheme of things, but it's something that actually happened, and we feel for those people in that part of the country that had to withstand that. But box beef cutout values were lower on Wednesday. We've been gaining and gaining and gaining here for almost 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden a little bit lower. Choice cuts down 85 cents at $312.17. Selects fell just under $300 at $299.61, and that was down $126 compared to the previous day. Slaughter 364,000. That's 1,000 more than the same time last week and 11,000 less than the same time a year ago. Talk about what else is going on. Legend Bank is where you need to look at for fast and efficient cattle financing, guys. They're in North Texas. They can help you anywhere in Texas and anywhere in Oklahoma. Greg Brooks and Ricky Taylor, they know cattle loans, and they're waiting for people to come apply for cattle loans. Most of your banks and lending institutions are running from cattle interest there, but they're not at Legend Bank. Remember that Legend Bank is a member of FDIC. All loans are subject to credit approval, and they are an equal housing lender. Check them out at legend.bank. Talk about your feeder cattle market, your real-time index on DVAuction, based on an 800-pound cash auction steer up through your middle 12 states, sitting at $249.24. That was up $2.10 compared to the end of trade on Tuesday. And so we've already gained about $4.50 on your index since the 7-day moving average from going in this week, because the market's just been higher. And we getting all those 7 days filled with these big high prices. This thing is really gaining ground. Don't forget about your punchy pick of the month contest. We're having fun with that. If you guys catch a punchy pick on your phone or somewhere, just in your everyday activities, email that pick to punchy@nationalbeefwire.com, and you could possibly win the grand prize, which is some cool stuff from Beaver Feed Company in Beaver, Oklahoma, some really cool stuff from Beaver County Stockyards, and then that whole case of Fairpiece, which everybody's got to try, guys. And it's a fun contest to be involved with. Talk about your big sales on Wednesday. OKC West, El Reno, Oklahoma, had 10,500 head of feeder cattle this week, including a light run of calves on Tuesday, but 10,500 head. That is a big run. Of course, they had a pretty good run a year ago this week of 9,300 head, but boy, what a market. Feeder steers were mostly steady with the big gains that we saw last week, but I think they were a bit higher than that when I looked at your automated market report. There was definitely gains there. Feeder heifers $3 to $6 higher, and calves on Tuesday $5 to $10 higher. OKC West was your National Beef Wire stick-out sale of the day. This is the market in the upper southern plains or the lower Midwest, guys, and this is on your feeder type cattle. Your calves, it was a light run of calves on Tuesday. This is just Wednesday's sale, but check out these weighted averages. This is the market, and largely on commodity type cattle. There was 987 head of 7-weight steers. They averaged 761 at 258.14. 1,910 head of 8-weight steers in El Reno averaged 853 at 239.10. And over 1,400 head of 9-weight feeder steers, El Reno, Oklahoma, weighted average weight 952, weighted average price 224.82. Pretty impressive. How about the heifers? 1,243 head of 7-weight heifers averaged 747 at 236.05, and 954 head of 8-weight heifers averaged 848 at 218.27. I'm also going to give you a quote out of a premium type sale in the Northern Plains. And I say premium, it's premium to quality, and just bringing big prices up there. They have some of the best genetics in the world up there in the Northern Plains, and it was Stockman's Livestock out of Yankton, South Dakota. It was a special sale there they had, and look at some of these prices. Now this is more on premium type quality up in the Northern Plains, guys. 222 head of 7-weight steers averaged 743 at 279.29. 212 head of 8-weight steers averaged 842 at 260.57. Weighted average on all of them, guys. 370 head of 9-weight steers averaged 958 at 232.89. Look at some heifers. I'm about 564 head of 8-weight heifers averaged 857 at 229.12, and 339 head of 9-weight heifers averaged just 910 at 217.52. Give an individual quote out of Bloomfield Livestock Market in Bloomfield, Iowa. They sell 62 steers, weighed 843 at 265. Now, going to give you that big quote that we talked about here, the early part of the report. It's the biggest string. It was a big load of 8-weight stockers. They were going to graze, guys. That's the only thing that made any sense out of this quote here. But they were green, they had the condition to graze, and they had quality to burn. I tell you what, we're in a new day here where we got 8-weight grazers here. Your Macrocin, no BS, top quote for the day, come out of Stockman's Livestock Market in Yankton, South Dakota. Greg Reichen there's got that sale running on all cylinders there. Does a great job on the fat cattle and the feeder cattle on Wednesdays. Specials as advertised. But on Wednesday they sold 84 steers, 804 pounds to go to grass at $290. That's your feeder flash for Thursday.